So for most of us, having dinner or reading by candlelight is a once-in-a-while choice. But for 600 million people on the continent of Africa, it is an everyday reality. Our next award winner is changing that. Here to present the National Security and International Affairs Medal is the president of the Rockefeller Foundation and the former administrator of USAID, Raj Shah. Please welcome Raj Shah.
Good evening. Thank you, Judy. At the U.S. Agency for International Development, Andrew Herscowitz has led a public-private partnership called Power Africa, which is now bringing electricity to more than 50 million people in Liberia, Zambia, Ghana, and several other sub-Saharan African countries. To do so, Andy and his Power Africa team coordinated the work of more than 160 private partners, African governments, more than a dozen U.S. federal agencies, and when obstacles arose, they were able to get people to work together and collaborate. And that's because they understood a simple but very important fact. Access to electricity, which we take for granted, is in fact the core constraint to countries being able to grow their economies, lift their families out of poverty, and help their children make the most of their God-given potential. Andy and his team built a solid foundation for this bold foreign policy initiative to power industry and communities in Africa. Their work advances U.S. national security interests, fosters economic development, and promotes stability in the farthest corners of the globe. At the same time, the initiative is creating hundreds of millions of dollars in export opportunities for American companies. Based in both the United States and South Africa, Andy and his diverse 56-person Power Africa team have advanced 117 projects and mobilized more than $17 billion in private investment. The U.S. government disbursed about $500 million for this effort, and the Power Africa partnership has stimulated the export of an equal amount in U.S. goods and services. The effort has also helped secure thousands of jobs right here in the United States at American companies. Perhaps this is why Congress passed the Electrify Africa Act into law on a bipartisan basis. Isn't that nice to hear? Power Africa is a new model for global development, bringing to bear private investment, public sector government reform, and international standards to fight fraud and corruption. The Power Africa team works every day to ensure that Africa's young people, in fact, across the continent, with more than 1 billion people, the median age is 19. This team works every day to make sure those young people have hope and opportunity. Here's a video to tell you more about this incredible program.
Power Africa is an initiative that involves 12 U.S. government agencies and more than 160 public and private partners trying to work together to double access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. You've got 600 million people on the continent who have no access to electricity. And what we do is we work with the private sector to make the investments necessary and help them unstick their deals so that they can provide the power to people on the continent. We help make sure that there's the energy so that industries can succeed, but it's also electricity for people in rural areas. We've got 50 million people who have access to electricity who didn't have access to electricity before Power Africa was launched. We've helped governments like Ethiopia negotiate the first ever private investment in the power sector. The first ever solar project is built and operational in Rwanda. The first ever competitions for solar are taking place in Zambia and in Senegal with our support. But what binds us all together is it's part of the national security strategy to provide universal energy access. So often what we're trying to do is make sure that U.S. companies are aware of the opportunities. So you're creating jobs in the U.S., you're creating jobs in Africa as well. If people don't have access to electricity, they don't have jobs, they become hopeless, they turn to illicit activities. And so it's in our interest to make sure that people on the African continent have vibrant, meaningful lives and productive lives so that their children can have a bright future and be our future partners. So one of the coolest things that I've experienced as I've been with Power Africa was about 3 or 4 months ago. My son, who was in 9th grade, was in social studies class, and his teacher started their international development unit, and the first thing that he brought up was this thing called Power Africa, which is a really great example of how international development could work. And the fact that it had made it into my son's curriculum, that in and of itself made it all worthwhile.
I've had a chance to see and work with Andrew Herscowitz up close and personal. And I just want to say the success of this effort is driven in large part by his leadership, his tenacity, his unwillingness to say we can't get something done, and ultimately his heart. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the winner of the 2018 National Security and International Affairs Medal, Andrew Herscowitz and the Power Africa team.
So this is a lot of fun for a few reasons, but I still remember when Raj gave me a call about this job and gave me the offer that I couldn't refuse. I was the USAID mission director in Ecuador, really enjoying the work that I was doing. And I turned to my wife and I said, I think I need to do this. She said, yeah, you need to do this. And that was Raj, and here we are 5 years later, and I absolutely love this job, and we have the most incredible team. I'd like to thank, most importantly, though, my wife, Tracy, who not only took a red eye to be here, but moved our children 4 times in 3 years to help accommodate all of these changes of working with USAID, and put her own career on hold at times so that we could commit ourselves to this effort. The people who are standing behind me represent all facets of the Power Africa team. John Garrison, who was working on Power Africa even before I started, Raj was doing the same. You see Nilmani Rubin up here, who was one of the architects of the Electrify Africa Act. And then we have some of our transaction advisors, the people who are on the ground in Senegal, in Kenya, showing how a 12 U.S. government agency effort can really show the best of the U.S. government. People always say the U.S. government agencies can't work together, and Power Africa has proven them wrong. So much so that the current administration loves this model so much that they want to replicate it across geographies and across sectors. So I can't thank enough the Congress, the U.S. government agencies that work on this, all of our other development partners, and most importantly, we want to thank the African governments themselves, those that have created the space for the private sector to make the investments that are necessary to help bring electricity to the 600 million people on the African continent who don't have access. Our work is just getting started. 50 million seems like a big number, but we still have a long way to go. So thank you, everyone.